do you have a memory of visiting a building by your great grandfather for the very first time? And do you recall that experience?
Well, yeah, I don't know if it was the first one or not. The one that I remember the most is probably Falling Water, but that would have been when I was somewhere around 10. And there were probably ones before that because we lived in California and he has a lot of work out there. And I know we went to several properties out there. We had family out there and all of that. But the funny part about it is, it was, when you're young like that, for me, it was like mother used to drag us to museums. And drag us is the right word because we weren't that interested. And so it was kind of similar to that. I was just like, okay, this is kind of cool. This is kind of interesting, but it wasn't a big deal. And it really wasn't until I was 30 years old in design school, well after mother had passed, that I understood the significance of my legacy because I wasn't raised with, oh, he's a famous architect. I was raised with this is your great grandfather. And because I already had a famous mother, then that got kind of lost in the shuffle. And I was in my textbooks in design school because design school was my second career and my second degree. I already had a degree from Cornell in hotel and restaurant management, and I'd been in the field for 5 years. Mother had passed my year after graduation, and I'm flipping through my textbook and I'm like, wait, wait, that's great grandfather. And I'm like, I think he might have been significant. So I really did not have a clue because I wasn't raised with America's most famous, though not favorite architect. I was raised by a film star. So I was already dealing with that. And then it only, I'm related to apparently quite a few famous dead
Oh,
relatives.
you are. And could you tell us a few things about your mother? What you remember about her?
Um, Mother had a lot of respect and a lot of appreciation for great grandfather. Mother was Ann Baxter, Oscar winner in 46 for The Razor's Edge, Oscar nominee with Betty Davis for All About Eve, and they canceled each other out. So there's still some controversy around that. But Mother revered all things art and culture. And she, like I said, she dragged us through museums because my mother's idea of going to a museum was not, enjoying each piece for 5 minutes, but literally standing there and rhapsodic about, a piece for 20 minutes. And my sister and I are sitting over here on a bench going, oh my God, it's mom again. Typical kid behavior. And now I'm the one that when I go to museum will stand there and be awestruck and read all about it and, be informed. So it eventually came back around. And I remember mother talking about the way at Falling Water, the windows cornered together and how unique that was. And I remember her just being kind of awestruck through the entire property. And she'd been there before. Um, but it was sort of like, oh, mom's just being mom again. I didn't connect any dots at that point. And I didn't go to design school my first time out of the gate because I didn't see it as a serious professional path. And I like to joke that, great grandfather and I would have had very spirited conversations because he referred to us as inferior desecrators, not interior decorators. And I'm not an interior decorator. I am an interior designer because I am degreed in the field. And that is an important distinction that most people don't understand. But whether you're a decorator or a designer, you should not be referred to as inferior ever. So, and ironically, it was partly because he felt so strongly that he was creating an entire lifestyle for his clients. So he went far beyond where most architects play, which is I like to refer to it as the envelope for living, but what makes it habitable is the design and the furnishings and those pieces. And so great grandfather literally dictated. He was not, really democratic in his approach. He was like, you will live like this. And it worked. It worked really well for those that he did this for. Um, I'm sure I'm going to mix up the names of some of the houses because I'm famous for doing that. But I remember going to a home. I went on several of the tours with the building conservancy, and one of the homes in particular struck me. It was a beautiful home, but we got into one of the bedrooms, and he had lopped off the foot of the bed at an angle because it didn't fit the room otherwise. And I'm like, so let me understand this. You either have to be very petite or you have to sleep curled up in a ball. And then facing that, he had angled the built-in chest of drawers. I've never forgotten it. I thought it was genius. And at the same time, I'm like, completely impractical, because we've become much larger, taller people. So today that might not work unless it was a
Yeah.
children's room.
Yeah. But
But he forced fits in places.
do you feel like there are so many stories about him, and sometimes people, and he's of course so colorful and had such
Yeah.
a huge span of his career. So there are so many stories, but I feel like sometimes people assume that he was so controlling and see it as negative thing, but it almost feels that these clients were welcoming for someone
Yes.
to educate them
Yes.
enhanced their way of living and said, tell us how to live beautifully, right?
So
It
I think it was I think it was a bit less of an enhancement than it was an education and an informed approach. And this way of living you will find more satisfying and fulfilling.
Yes.
And when I say dictatorial, it's not a negative. It's coming from a place of knowledge, expertise, experience, and supreme confidence. Now, that he did have in spades. But most creatives struggle with that aspect. And rather than bashing someone for that, they should be looking at it going, and I aspire to that level of confidence because that allowed him to truly implement his greatest creative visions that are still standing today. Otherwise, we wouldn't have them.
Yeah, how lucky are we that
Yeah,
so much was preserved. And
yeah.
I was kind of I was very surprised when I heard of the Westcott House, because it was such a, in a sense, such a late discovery, but because the house was divided into apartments for over half a century, there was little access to even consider what this could become. And it was so severely changed over the years. So when they started restoration in 2001, it was kind of like, wow, there is a Frank Lloyd Wright house that has been kind of underappreciated until someone finally took care of it. And so since 2005, when we opened the doors to the public, it's been just amazing because it's such a wonderful resource for the whole state and beyond. And as with every Frank Lloyd Wright house or public building, people find it and come and go to great lengths to actually experience it for themselves. And many people tell us how livable this house is, how he so well responded to human needs. At the end of the day, it was about our senses, our daily rituals that are enhanced by the architecture.
Yeah, I think the way he designed, I've never been into one of his homes that wasn't warm and welcoming. And it had to do with designing it for human beings, not for an entity. Even when he designed his commercial, the S.E. Johnson and pieces like that, they worked for the people. And he was very much in tune with human design and flow and function and nature. And nature informs all of us and inspires all of us. And it's one of the fastest ways to change your mood is to go for a quick walk. So if you're in a Wright property, you actually don't have to leave the house to go for that walk in nature. You can simply walk the house and have the same impact, which is pretty extraordinary.
Yes, it is. By the way, do you have any favorite buildings by your great grandfather?
I have pieces of buildings that are favorites. So the Meyer May House, I'll
Mm.
never forget the first time I saw that. I was actually working for an architecture firm in Birmingham, Alabama, and it was the fireplace with the dichroic glass sandwiched between the brick that just took my breath away. I'd never seen that combination of materials before. Um, in other homes, it's something else. It just, each home has its own nuances and its own idiosyncrasies and its own special places. But that fireplace in particular just stopped me in my tracks. Um, the idea of the transparency with the solidity, and I'm a huge fan of dichroic anything. So that really caught me. That bed that I described that had been lopped off at an angle, and then with the built-in bureau facing, you would pull the drawers out and they were all on an angle. That was very fun. Very fun. Um, his individual pieces of furniture I really enjoy, even if many of them aren't particularly comfortable. Um, but I get that when you see him, he was very rarely seated. If he was seated, he was very much in motion. He was drawing. Otherwise, he was always a body in motion. And I think that informed the way he designed. He wanted us to be bodies in motion. And I think he would struggle with where we are today because we are all so sedentary and we have to schedule motion into our days. And that's kind of a sad place to be when you think about it. He's got
Yes,
loads and loads of quotes out there that are very colorful and very fun.
that's right. Well, and it's just so incredible for one architect to have so many public sites. I know in our world we talk about ideally you preserve the piece of, a residential piece of architecture in its original, for its original purpose. But I do think that so many of those homes, once they get turned into a museum like ours, it really enriches the public in so many ways, right? All of a sudden, we all have access, just like when we go to some of the greatest art museums in the world, right? We have this access and ability to experience it. There is no substitute for it. So, I do think that it is striking, though, that there are so many sites these days, public sites designed by Frank Lloyd Wright that are open to the public. There is no other architect like this, which is incredible.
No, there isn't. There isn't. He really is extraordinary in what he crafted. And it's different in each location because he was very much about making it of the earth, not on the earth. And each location is quite different. So what he did on the West Coast versus what he did in the Midwest versus what he did in Japan, it's all informed by the location.
But one of the things that fascinates me that I didn't know, Frank Lloyd Wright sometimes is, he's portrayed quite often as a genius, rightfully so. But sometimes we forget the journey. And when I read about how he experimented, how he just had this desire to constantly experiment, sometimes probably at the cost of timely, submission of design, but that idea is sometimes lost on us, and I feel like for youth to kind of to connect them with this artist, with this incredible artist, is that idea that we are all expected to know everything instantly, right? And there is a long journey that happens, and tweaks and thinking and experimenting, and I really appreciate that about how he took that risk and he took time, and of course he created so many designs. It's incredible how productive he was, but still in between he was doing that big experimentation. It's amazing.
That's a really good point because there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes that the client doesn't see, that the world doesn't see. And then all of a sudden, when he shakes out a drawing, they think, oh, he could shake it out of his sleeve. And I'm like, well, yeah, but wait a minute. He'd been thinking about it, pondering it, experimenting with it, visualizing it in his head for the last 6 months, for the last 2 years. And that's what it takes. It's rather like, writing a book. I'll think about it for the 6 months and then I'll produce it very, very quickly. But it's because I've been thinking about it and mulling it over, and I did the research, and I looked for the quotes, and I looked for and then it gelled. It just sort of gets to that place creatively where it comes together and you can produce something that the world can understand. The rest of the time it's inside of us and nobody can make any sense of it, but we can still see it and play with it and imagine it. Yeah. And that's necessary.
Necessary.
That time in imagining is the most valuable time there is.
That's so true. Well, Melissa, what do you look forward to when you visit the Westcott House?
I want to meet the people that have supported the Westcott House. I want to see the house, of course, but to me, it's the people that make it all possible. And I see great grandfather less as a legacy than an expansion of our cultural heritage and an opportunity to inform our lives in today and tomorrow. Um, and I think that that's what makes it so wonderful because it's so practical.
Mm.
Um, it's not one of those. I just spent a weekend in Newport, Rhode Island, and you get into those mansions, and I'm just looking around going, I can appreciate this, but I wouldn't want to live in it. I don't want to change clothes 8 times a day for the balls and the this and the that. It sounds tedious. But great grandfathers left a legacy that doesn't go out of date,
Yes.
that is continually inspiring us and inspiring not simply designers and architects, but everyone because it's attainable. It's real. I mean, you can see a kitchen that you could actually cook a meal in. You can see a living room where you want to gather. Um, you can see bedrooms and baths that are functional. It's a high degree of relatability instead of an era gone by. And I
That
think
is,
that's what makes it so interesting and being able to come out there and get to reconnect with Vicky. I love Vicky. And meet some of the other people that have been associated with the restoration and preservation and opening to the public, which is a big responsibility. My hope is that this this masterpiece that he created, along with the many other masterpieces that he's created, are preserved and honored and shown as a living, breathing opportunity to experience what can be, not simply what was. He's so relevant, and we want to maintain the relevancy and the value and the meaning. Um, he would have appreciated it as a living, breathing form of art and science, because there's a lot of science in what he did. Even if the engineers of the day couldn't keep up with the science and flat roofs are perpetually leaky, oops. You know, but it does give us a jumping off point for what's possible. It really does. And I think that's priceless.